Thank you for joining us. I'm Chris Williams. I'm the CMO at Arima Data, and joining me is TS Kelly in New York. I'm in Toronto. A little bit about us. TS and I have worked together on agency side for quite a long time at various agencies. And you were most recently at
head of media effectiveness at Dentsu.
I see.
For joining you.
Yeah, and my most recent agency gig, of course, was at Havas here in Toronto. I think collectively, TS and I have worked on probably over 40 pitches, which is the topic of today. And in addition to our work on the agency side, after that, I was on the association side. So I was in the ACA, which is the equivalent, like in the United States, of the ANA, where we worked with a lot of advertisers on their pitches and were helpful and supportive in understanding why they were pitching business and where they wanted to go with their pitches as they were moving out into the landscape of talking to various media agencies, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so where this is coming from today is at Arima, we've been working with a lot of agencies. And one of the things that they've been asking us is like, how can you help in terms of our pitch situations when we have to jump in there and talk about media measurement, media effectiveness? You know, what are you guys doing in that area that we could sort of bring into our RFPs, our written up RFPs, and help us win business, which is actually how we've termed this, winning the equation with MMM, how your agency can win, and win some more after that. And again, it's our intent is to be helpful. You know, so hopefully we're not. Hopefully we're adding some new stuff that is helpful to you. Excuse me, just to have a look at the thing here. Let's start off with looking at the scope. We're focusing on the RFP. We recognize there's kind of like three buckets of pitching. One is the RFI, the request for information, which is very broad. Second step, of course, is a request for proposal, where the agencies are writing up specific proposals in response to a scope of work. And then, of course, after that, there's the shortlist, and you get into the in-person, in-room pitch. We don't deal with that part, and we don't deal with the RFI part. We're sort of in the middle looking at the RFP because of the written nature of that. Obviously, the in-person pitch has a lot to do with pitch magic and building chemistry and, you know, the presentation. So that's really up to the agencies. Obviously, the scope is really focused on media agencies or media agencies that are pitching with their creative partners. And so the question is, of course, how can we bring some of our media knowledge into the RFP response? One of the key things, of course, is just brevity. When it comes to answering an RFP, sometimes the agency sort of gets a little bit loquacious about things. But you have to remember, you know, while you're having the challenge of writing one RFP response, the poor client on the receiving end is going to probably be, you know, having to read through 3 to 6 of these things. And so if it's repetitious, or if it's grammar is a challenge, or if they're typos, it can be atrocious. And I've seen RFPs, agency responses to RFPs get thrown away because case studies are full of typos. No matter what the numbers are, it's the typos. It clearly signals, you know, the agency's attention to detail. So also, now that we have ChatGPT, you know, which can deliver a ton of word salad if you let it run loose, it's a danger. So make sure that you edit, make sure that you check your grammar, make sure that you check your spelling. It's really table stakes on all of that stuff. And so we just wanted to get this out of the way.
Chris, I'm glad you put that in there. Just if you go back for a sec.
Yeah, sure.
You know, as working in measurement analytics, well, most of my career, I'm guilty as charged when it comes to being a little too, because you get to wanting to be exacting and tell every single iota. So I'm glad we're starting with the basics before we get into MMM's role. It just because in some respects you can lose people just from the tonnage that you're talking about. And let's flip it to the reading of the brief, because that's really where you get to find out specifically what they're asking for. It might be explicit, it might be implicit. You might get some early indicators from various sources, or even talking with the consultancy that's perhaps involved to the prioritization. Making that list is probably the key. It's like, what are they seeking? You might be able to refine the prioritization in later process, but make this list. And I just kind of check mark things that have come up in some more recent pitches that I've been involved in, but this list could be significantly longer, but making sure that you know exactly what they're seeking before you even start writing pen to paper.
Sure.
There's a lot of table stakes that go into what you put into the RFIs and then into the RFP. Without a doubt, it's being able to express your competency and expertise in assessing media performance. That's absolutely critical. The rest of this will, again, when we send you you can have this list, but the rest of those, I'd argue, are table stakes between, the things that you can be proud of and most, again, the things that you put in LinkedIn, whatever it may be. But it is the assessing of media performance that's absolutely critical when you're showcasing capability.
For sure.
Then it comes to questions. And this also could be a long list, but just kind of going over a few of the ones that come up more frequently than others is demonstrating your approach towards, again, coming back from my own past, is media effectiveness and how you measure it, capabilities and technology. They're going to have to explain your tech stack. It could be a budgeting exercise. Those can be a bit more tactical in their responses. The key one, though, is that last one. They're going to be very specific business challenges that you have to be clear and clearly address in your response between launching new products, some sort of challenge they have in the marketplace, some emerging competition, whatever. But that's really where it is. It's about addressing the media contribution to specific business challenges, and that's what you need to convey.
So that's sort of, starting at the top, we're now down into the area of like, what is the role of MMM in the pitch? Obviously, it's about the assessing that effectiveness of the media side of things. So first question, well, what is market mix modeling? Just in case people don't know, it literally is looking at the correlations between media spend, media activity, media weight, and outcome measurement, which is typically sales. So it's a correlation analysis probability. And that comes out of it is the assessment of the media performance, the assessment of campaign performance. And we're going to show you a lot more details about how that looks. You might also see things in the RFP questions or, what is the agency's point of view on things like market mix models, media mix models, multi-touch attribution, hybrid types of measurement. Advertisers want to understand how you think about these things. So, you have to have a point of view ready to be able to say, this is our agency's philosophy around effective measurement. And of course, what are the technologies that support that? At the end of the day, it's about alignment, right? The advertisers out there, they've got a lot of marketing efforts. They've got maybe a multiple agency relationship, some internal, some external. They've got creative agencies involved. And then, of course, they have their objectives. And so the ability to look at those two things, the input and the output, is literally what an MMM does. It looks at those correlations. So some of the key questions that get answered: contribution of the media in terms of return on ad sales, and you'll see us use this a lot, ROAS. So the contribution of the media towards sales or whatever the KPI is in all different situations. So is it a new product? Is it a brand launch? Or what is it? Or do we have an extended sales target that needs to be modeled out? Maybe there's a new audience, or we're going into a new market. There's a different geography, or there's new franchises being opened up. Or maybe the advertiser's just saying, this is what our channel mix was in the past, and we're looking for a point of view on what it should be in the future. And so it becomes a question of like, how do we change things? This really opens the door for the agency to talk about their unique capabilities to address those business challenges. So, what kinds of technologies, what philosophy you have, but also things like price and speed. So, we know in the past, for instance, that MMM was super expensive. It took a long time. It was cumbersome. And so typically it was seen as not a core service. It was a project that would be done outside what the agency was typically done, almost like a media buy. You would go out an RFP, a specific MMM partner. But we think that that's changing, and that it's actually now core to the agency's services. And so that means that they want to understand, the advertiser wants to understand the price and the speed and the capabilities that you built into your offering. Also, they want to see things like establishing performance and testing frameworks. And TS is going to talk a lot more about frameworks here in a second. It is important that advertisers have the ability to sort of like sandbox the way that they approach new things, because they don't, there's going to be new things that come along the way. And the question is, how do we determine, is it good? Is it bad? Is it working for us? Is this one you or me? I can't remember, TS.
Well, this is just the fact that there are many flavors to ROAS. I mean, as far as you could be looking at performance from a sales perspective, that could be their main dependent, the dependent variable, if you will. But there are other volumetrics that could play a part in understanding the contribution of media. So we could be looking at the dependent variable that's a volumetric in nature. So customer acquisition, coupon downloads, sites. There's a number of different ways that MMM and can be a contributing part to understanding what media is doing to reach business objectives. And then that testing part, again, so you think of the third leg of the stool, is that you could be running parallel MMMs where you have match markets. So Madison, Wisconsin, or maybe Vancouver in Canada could have every channel, but not the whole mix, and you could see them running in parallel. So MMM plays a part in testing too.
Sorry, I didn't mean to press the button there, but we
No,
did
go.
ahead. So again, it's budget scenarios. Again, the what if question. Many times in the RFP process, client has a defined amount of money and they have a defined objective. And the question is, can we achieve what we're trying to do based on the money that we have? How do we model that out given where we're at? How much is required? If that's not the right amount, how much is the right amount? And how do we understand that? So they're going to want to know what's behind the model and how that works. Also, as the relationship carries on, they're going to want to understand things like, well, what happens if our budget goes up or down? Is there new opportunities? Or what happens, to our relationship if we have to pull some of the media money back? How is that going to sort of play out? You need to be able to describe that in the RFP response.
Could be one of their challenges, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love pitches. As I said, spending a good portion, if not the majority of my time on the supporting brands, namely at agencies. There's always that when you're working on the analytics team, there's an expectation. It's like, what number are we going to hit? Like, what mountain are we going to climb together? And no matter what that number is usually revealed during the pitch theater at the end of the process, or at some point when you're physically in location, pre-COVID, or again those last rounds of meetings. It isn't so much about the number, it is about convincing them that you have what it takes to go on that journey with them. So yes, you're going to have your big number, your big reveal, but can you convince them in the RFP that you have the types of solutions that are necessary to get them there? And MMM can play a huge part of that. So specifically what I've got in front, I'm going to show you, is a journey. Now this is a basic one, but I think it's an important one to map out, is where you are going on this journey alongside your client. And typically a measurement discussion that has MMM integrated also has data and technology components. So you're going to hit it again, to highlight that center lane, if you will, Chris, is that measurement plays a key part. You just click it again if you don't mind. Yeah, thank you, sir. Is that measurement is a direct connection to that journey. So in that first stage in the RFP, you're defining what that journey is, giving them some frameworks, which I'll share with you. From there, you're then moving on to learnings that you get from those frameworks and initial tests, and building out benchmarks. And finally, you can think of this crawl, walk, run. You're integrating that with the data solutions and technology solutions for a more holistic framework of overall performance. Now, this is a strategic level approach. MMM, again, playing a part through every step along the way. What I'm going to show you now is how you measure along each step of the way. So a couple of different approaches. This one, I'm going to show by time and then more by funnel. This is your typical 3x3. So when you think about the way campaigns run, when you're working with in media, working with a brand, from top left to bottom right, you're starting with the campaign that starts. And anyone that's familiar with ETL, which is about building out dashboards and Tableau or Datorama, whatever it may be. It's a lot of tactical analysis of campaign activity, and you're doing a feverish amount of work optimizing and showing efficiencies in delivery, all good stuff. We're going to focus for most of this is in that right column, the types of detail that you see days, weeks, and the early months into campaign. Those early days, you might see some indication of online demand based on traffic, some kind of queries and search, etc. But it's very broad. As days turn into weeks, then we see those awareness numbers start to formulate between just what you happen to be doing. Expression of exposure turns into intent based on branded search and sentiment. Then from a conversion perspective, we're again in the early stages. We might get some preliminary offline share if you're like a CPG of what's happening in stores. Maybe there's some increased activity in your locations. You might be able to do some preliminary ROAS. That's again the magic of using like various types of formulas with impression level data, but it's not giving you a full picture. So think of those as more tactical in campaign, etc. But as we move to that bottom right, when we're seeing those weeks turn into months, then we're seeing the full penetration, be it with sales, online, offline, physical location, whatever those primary dependent variables, those primary KPIs may be, you'll have the opportunity to do full ROAS. And MMM is at the heart of being able to provide that type of detail in the bottom right.
Awesome.
There you go. That box didn't need that box, but that's okay. Why don't you launch that box for me now anyway, just so you can see it. That here's a different way of looking at that same measurement framework, not from time, but now based on the funnel. And if you read the brief, you'll see they're likely going to have upper, middle, and lower funnel type priorities. And whether or not they consider, and you have the budget for them, etc., there's going to be at least some need to talk about them. We're going to focus really on the conversion for this, just based on the role of MMM, is that you might have different types of tools that you're doing for awareness and consideration. For conversions, there's going to be, again, those primary KPIs. Those are the things that we're trying to measure, be it sales or some other volumetric, or again, other things that we talk about as being critical to business performance. And then the next one is the diagnostic KPIs, and we might have ROAS in its many flavors. The way we present this to the client is both about in campaign from an attribution perspective, as well as campaign centric. And that's what MMM, think of it almost like a universal pixel, looking at all channels together or individually or some combination to see what the contribution of media is overall. And then when we think about optimization and learning plans, MMM plays an important part as well. It's not just about control testing and DCO, or you're going to be doing your RCTs, your random control testing within campaign. I almost call those MMM light causal models, etc. Incrementality. Where campaign-centric MMM allows you to do, as an example, match market testing, running 2 MMMs at the same time to see the contribution of media, perhaps in a new market with a new product. Madison, I keep saying Madison, Wisconsin, or Vancouver. Maybe you're not going to run radio and TV in Vancouver or Madison to see what the influence of those channels may be elsewhere. So it allows you, MMM allows you to create environments to do testing as well. It's an exciting way to utilize MMM, not just for what happened at the end, but also for optimization and attribution.
Yeah, so when we're going to use MMM in the RFP is essentially it's relevant to apply, to proving out various media mixes. So, again, in case studies, if you wanted to show we've tried these various media mixes and here's how it resulted in sales, just as TS was saying, you can do that geographically. Also in the RFP, there's going to be questions about how do you deal when there's multiple agencies that are going to be in the relationship. And some advertisers, of course, have brought some services in-house. So there's an internal agency. There might be an external agency for creative, an external agency for media, PR, but all of those things actually do work together. And the way to sort of bring the numbers together is within the market mix model. All of the various marketing activities are present in the marketing mix model. And that's really one of the big differences between, let's say, a marketing mix model and a media mix model. Is it includes things like trade promotions and other specialized activities. So you're operating at the broadest level of media pressure, and the broadest level of outcomes or sales. Exploring new spend thresholds, and we'll have a look at how we can do this actually within the tools, which is important because you need to understand the budget and testing new channels, new geographies. And this is what it looks like. I mean, this is really the sort of the first step of what an MMM looks like. Typically, you have the blue is the actual sales, orange is the modeled sales, the math model that represents them, and then green is the forecast. And this becomes a fantastic collaboration point between the advertiser and their agencies, including their media agencies, to say, okay, well, what does the next quarter, what does the next half or the next year look like, given things like seasonality, given, is it the same media spend, same media mix? Well, what if becomes the big question? What if we changed something? So that's where you see the sliders on the right-hand side. You can use the model to say, if we change something, this will be the impact on the outcome, which looks like this. Advertisers, of course, in an RFP will say, here's what the challenge looks like. We think we're going to have, $10 million, whatever it is. Is that enough money? And you need to have some way of going through the details and go, well, this is what we spent in the past. This is what it turns into in terms of sales or incremental sales. What happens if we don't have enough money? And you slide the number back and forth and point out, in order to achieve your objective, you actually need this amount of money. But it's also a great place, like once you've determined those figures, like as an example, and here it's showing how important search is to achieving your goals. Well, as an agency, it's an opportunity to say, well, if we're going to achieve them, we need to be really, really good at search. And let's show you in our response just how we handle search. What tools do we have there? What expertise, what case studies that are going to be critical to the advertiser's future success, given the potential budget that's on the table.
Chris, I love this visualization because of what it doesn't show. Behind this is obviously another tool component that shows the curves as they're building over time between the various channels that are being used. So that slider that shows it right dead center is that's always an interesting question, even coming back to like 2022 when working at an agency where a client may ask you, we're cutting 20% of our budget. What is that going to have an impact? In this case, sales, or it could have been some other volume metric that we were focused on. And to say, all right, well, that's going to have X percent impact, and to be aware of that. And then that's when the exercise and the fun starts, because as you mentioned, looking at the interaction between these channels, showing different ways that we can maximize performance and minimizing the impact based on available budget. That this is the environment which allows us to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, obviously the term is, we need to do more with less. Everybody says that. I mean, there's a limit. I mean, at some point in time, less equals less, and you have to be able to show that.
Well, again, that we put it as defend. You're kind of defending or extending or shifting. And in many cases, there's a lot of defending.
There's a lot of defending that has to happen. But I mean, you have to be in a place where there's a lot of trust in that collaboration point to have the discussion and say, well, here's the implications of how we look at it. I mean, here's another example, right? The market mix model breaks down all the media spend by channel, and it looks at the ROAS per channel broken out, and it also looks at the overall campaign. And we put a big red arrow over there on the overall campaign of, for every dollar that's going into media, it's yielding $4.03 of revenue in this case. And this is just an example, but it's potentially the RFP could say, this is where we're at today. How do we get that to be $5? And that becomes a challenge for the agency to say, well, we need to be more efficient, and we need better effectiveness. That's the E&E that's in the title there. So clearly it becomes an optimization process here.
And to that point, I mean, just that third column from the right, we talk about what, the balance between effectiveness and efficiencies is that whether or not you read you subscribe to the Byron Sharp or Les Binet playbook when it comes to, the brand impact and so forth, is that we're looking here at the difference between, say, long and short-term ROAS as well. So there are different ways that we can be breaking this out not just TV, but individual campaigns per channel as well that can show the efficacy of media. Because if you were to argue right now, you'd say, wow, $3, that's not as good as display or FSI. But like, well, where were we a year ago when it came to TV
For
or
sure.
specific parts of the campaign? So this is just like the tip of the iceberg on how you talk ROAS, but it really, this is the most important discussion component for sure.
For sure. And those curves also, I mean, right now you'd look over at display and say, let's do more of that. You know, those curves flatten out eventually, and you sort of go,
Yep.
there's only so much you can put into a certain type of medium before it levels off.
Right.
Which brings us to this is looking at the overall contribution of media specifically. And again, the big red arrow to say, look, here's all the contribution of sales that the overall campaign is doing, both media and creative. Is this amount of sales and you know the volume of sales coming from each of the channels. And as you can see, even though in the previous example, display had a very high number, well, display actually hasn't delivered as much as other media in this mix. So it's not just to the efficiency, you actually have to sort of look at the volume of things and the contribution from a volume perspective to make sure that you're not, you know, being overly efficient and to the point of losing sales.
I like this, but my favorite.
This is your favorite.
Yes, yeah. Well, because MMM, I mean, again, MMM is marketing mix modeling. So you're not just looking at media's contribution, but you're also taking into account the externalities that could impact either competition, in recent years, COVID. You know, you have a certain amount of brand momentum that you might have based on being a leading brand or, you know, kind of a challenger brand, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of components that play a part. And what we call this the waterfall for a reason. You're looking at each contribution individually to lead up to that big number. So to me, that's where, you know, this plays to me is where it's broken down. This and most important.
It really shows, I mean, shows that it offers the agency the opportunity to go into a bunch of different areas. They could talk about on the right-hand side, you know, the importance of certain media and doing, you know, what they do. But it also opens the door on the left-hand side to say, well, let's talk about the consumer, or let's talk about the competitive factors. Let's talk about the marketplace. You know, if you're having interest rates problems or, you know, supply chain problems for vehicles or things like this. Clearly, it allows the media agency to have a much broader scope of knowledge that it brings to the table back into the RFP to say, we keep track of a bunch of things that are really important because they affect your sales. Even if we can't change them, we know how important, you know, things like competitive factors are, and we keep track of who your competitors are.
Chris and TS, you have a question in chat.
Oh,
it
great.
says, what if I don't have sales data?
Well, this is exactly where we're going with this particular slide, actually. So thank you for the question. Well, if you don't have sales data, what we are recommending is that you move towards what we call a minimum viable model. And this is use the data that you have in front of you as it is, and show the client that modeling is a viable approach forward so that they can actually get you the data that you're going to need to continue to build out the model. And sometimes they don't even realize that you know, this is available at the price or at the speed at which it is available now. So there's many marketers right now that are in a place where old school MMM was like $500,000, took 6 months. You know, you shipped off all the data and you never saw it again, and it came back, you know, months later.
That's typically, you know, the role of like some of the agencies where they're playing data custodian in that type of dynamic, for sure.
Yeah, and so this is changing dramatically. Is the ability to say, okay, well, let's start with building a minimum viable model. The agency probably has the ability to say, let's look at like Google Analytics traffic and whatever media pressure that they can see on their side as just sort of very two basic input and output factors. They can create a model. Is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. Is it going to show the client that they can do modeling? Absolutely. Show that they can do it quickly and that they can do it as a core service that the agency brings to the table is a great thing. Think of it.
In many cases, I was just going to say that based on sales, in many cases, you're not going to have sales data for this type of dynamic, or for the context of a pitch. You might have some generic detail that you could use from branded search. And also, many times you don't necessarily have the competitive spend data. If you're, again, small, medium-sized agency, you might not have that detail, pathmatics, et cetera. Using competitive branded search, which is something that is typically available, Google Firehose or whatever else, can also be part of that initial MVM, minimum viable model. It is about building trust and saying, you know what, we have what it takes to go on this journey. If you give us your sales data, work together and get the spend and the competitive spend data detailed in, this 1.0 model becomes 2.0 rather quickly. So it's about going on that journey together.
And think of it, you're in a pitch situation. You're maybe one of 6 agencies that's responding to the RFP. You want your RFP response to include something that the other agencies don't have. And so if you've included something like a minimum viable model to say, in the matter of weeks that we were able to work on this, we produced this. It shows speed, agility, alignment of objectives, an understanding of where the client needs to go, and that's a pretty big card to play at this point in time.
Yeah.
And then you start thinking about MMM as kind of like a hub, right? So it's a place where the advertiser, the agency, some publishers, and everybody can actually have a look at the same set of data. What else can be built out from that hub? Kind of like a work backwards from what we see in the MMM ROAS numbers. We can look at it obviously by media type, which we've shown you, but potentially it's also by media deal. You might be dealing with media partners that have radio and television and out of home together. You can say, well, here's the value of that entire deal together. Or you can split up the ROAS by audience, by segment, or geography. Or if you're dealing with like franchisees or sort of dealer associations, would be let's split it up regionally and show each region what does their MMM look like. MMM is becoming a lot more flexible about how we sort of put these models together. So again, if you wanted to build out specifically for regional dealer associations and then be able to compare who's winning and doing a better job, it's a great way to show value. Yeah. So last slide on the content side is just a summary of what we're recommending that you should do is be concise, check on the table stakes of typos and grammar and things like that. Show your ability to align on the client's business needs and their objectives as they've written up in the RFP. Show the visual examples of how MMM supports your agency's strength. And so what we've done is we put together a little document that has a whole bunch of screenshots of how MMM is represented, for, as you saw in this deck. Those are available for you guys to use if you need to include that in your RFP response. And you can use them just to say, as these are examples of MMM measurement.
And the last two, just, this is about a journey. That certainly there's a lot of pitch theater that goes into play to winning business, and many variables that play a part in getting over the finish line. But building that trust from an analytics and measurement perspective is about showing and convincing them that you have what it takes to go on that journey. So you build out that data measurement journey framework strategically, and then you propose the framework either by time or again by steps within the funnel. And we look at MMM as being an integral part of measuring at each step along that journey. So you define the strategy, you build out the frameworks, and then you implement them. And as we've talked about, building out that minimum viable model, you don't need all the pieces. I tend to be a completist myself. It's one of my, that's kryptonite for me. But what, MMM teaches me ongoing is that I don't need to have every piece of the puzzle to start understanding the contribution media and other externalities have on business objectives for a client. So produce that MVM, and then we start talking about pricing, both the cost of doing business to reach those goals, be it from media, but also from staffing and all the other dimensions, and then also the speed. This stuff used to take months and months. Again, I used to be that data custodian, handing it off to somebody else. Speed means we could contribute to this discussion, within weeks and early months, not 3 to 6 months. And provide more detail and speed, because we want to optimize and influence decisioning now, not 3 months from now.
And usually your response to the RFP has to include things like the org chart and, number of FTEs and, job title descriptions that have to be part of the overall sort of proposed compensation structure. And clearly part of the technology shows up in overheads and overhead sort of, calculations of fees, right? And so you want to be able to support those things. You want to be able to bring to the client, the prospect,
Yeah.
the very best team that is comprehensive that will get the job done.
Right.
You want to be able to explain, why do we need certain things, and they're not out of scope or they're not nice to have, they're core to the actual service that you need to that you want
Chris,
to
if I could add one more thing too, is that
Yeah, sure.
getting this later baked into,
Yeah.
having read many SOWs in my lifetime, getting
Yeah.
this baked in later can be a challenge. It's like
Yes.
climbing yet another mountain. So you do want to show about this capability and make it a natural part of the process from the beginning. It's not impossible to do it later, and that's certainly part of the role that we've had, Chris and I, working together with a lot of important brands and agencies to make it an important aspect of how they measure media's contribution. But getting in the beginning in the RFP, that's a pretty good idea from the get-go.
Yep, for sure. So thank you for your time today. I hope that this has been helpful. That was the intent, was to sort of throw some ideas and show how we're thinking about MMM within the agency structure, the media agency structure. And there's our email. If you have some more questions, follow us on LinkedIn. We're always talking about stuff